There is a country on this planet, my friends, that is soon going to disappear from the face of the Earth. And I say face because it is about to be underwater. And no, it's not Atlantis, though the story of this really seems to be somewhat similar to that. It's kind of crazy. For centuries, man has been fascinated by the legend of the lost nation of Atlantis. It's a story for the ages. An island nation existed and traded with the greater world for apparently centuries before disappearing beneath the waves as if the ocean gradually digested it. Eventually, enough time passes that the island and its people's very existence is seen as unsure. It is something that is passed down in legend. In other words, a nation faces extinction due to rising ocean levels. Well, if Disney had any desire to reboot that absolutely amazing movie from my childhood, then yeah, they now have an actual option because we're about to tell you the story of the world's first nation that is about to be reclaimed by the ocean, and the ambitious plan to survive as a people and a nation, even if it, technically speaking, only exists on the internet, basically. Yes, my friends, today we're going to be talking about the world's least visited nation, Tuvalu. But before it is that we explain exactly what is happening, we are going to need to dive back in and explore a little bit of context. And also, at the same time, I want to say this right now here, my friends. I apologize for how it is that this video potentially looks with me. Not that editing that my editor does, that if we screw something up, I do apologize for that as well. Dakota, we're watching. No, I mean more so that right now I am literally filming this in a hotel in Croatia as we are getting ready to go onto our group trip to Turkey, which is about to be a blast. I cannot wait to meet a number of you guys who are going to be joining me there. And if you all want to join us on a future trip, we are going to both Thailand as well as Greece, and there are still spots available for those. So if you want to click the link down in my description and go on an adventure with my wife and I, it's going to be a blast. And by all means, join us. We're going to be doing a ton of videos from there. And if you go, you'll be featured in some of them. But my friends, before we continue with today's story, I would just like to thank today's sponsor, Aura. Which is very important, mind you, because I'm sure that for any of you who are watching this right now, any denizens of the internet, you're probably wondering, why the heck is it that I keep on getting flooded with spam calls and emails and things like that? And the answer is because your information is being sold by data brokers out there online. That is why I recommend today's sponsor, Aura, to my friends, followers, and family, because they actually take care of the hard part, automatically removing your info from these sites and keeping it off. Because the thing is, Aura is so much more than just a digital security service. You get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web, you get real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure, a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more, as well as US-based support available around the clock if something goes wrong. If something does go wrong somehow, yeah, you have up to $5 million in identity theft protection from Aura. So yeah, you're kind of covered. Seriously, there are so many bad actors out there on the internet, and considering how many people I have had that have made threats against me, my friends, my family, and more because of what it is that I do, I cannot let myself be vulnerable, and honestly, you should not either. Make sure to go to my link down in the description and try Aura for free for 14 days. Go to aura.com/history-of-everything, and just by trying it out, you can see for the first 14 days whether or not your data is out there on the internet. Please be safe, my friends. If there is anything that we have shown, the world is a dangerous and very complex place. Covering an area that spans around 420 miles, Tuvalu is made up of 9 islands, 6 of those being atolls. Now, Google tells us that an atoll is a ring-shaped island or coral reef that encircles a lagoon, and they're typically found in warm tropical environments. Tuvalu is situated roughly halfway between Hawaii and Australia. It is extremely isolated and is a couple hundred miles north of New Zealand, with a population of 11,000 people. It is, quite literally, the world's second least populous country after the Vatican City. Because again, 11,000 people. Its total land area is only 25 square kilometers, or just under 10 square miles, making it also the world's 4th smallest country by landmass. As for its history, back in 1568, when the Spanish blew through the area while searching for Australia, they didn't really stick around long enough to settle the land that they discovered here, as, naturally speaking, they had much bigger landscapes in their sight. In 1819, the island of Funafuti, the most populous island in the chain, was named Ellis's Island. Roughly half a century later, Great Britain would claim the Ellis Islands as part of their nautical sphere of influence in the region. Then, from 1916 to 1975, they were managed as part of the Gilbert and Ellice Island Colony. In 1974, a referendum would be held amongst the colony to decide whether the island chain should stay together as one colony or separate as independent colonies. As a result of the vote, the Gilbert and Ellice Island Colony would cease to exist on October 1st, 1975, and on January 1st, 1976, they were separated into separate British colonies that took on the names that they are known by today: Kiribati and Tuvalu. A little bit of a speed run, but you had to hear that part. Now, on October 1st, 1978, Tuvalu would gain its full independence as a sovereign state. On September 5th, 2000, Tuvalu would become the 189th member of the United Nations. They were finally sitting at the big boys table, if, as a very, very, very small nation, but still with the big boys. Still, though, that wasn't exactly going to change the situation for what Tuvalu was facing. Because here's the thing. One of the biggest challenges that Tuvalu has always faced is a lack of any considerable amount of soil. That's not just like, oh, soil that is necessary for agriculture. I mean, literally any soil because of how small the land area of the country is. This caused the country to rely heavily on food imports for anything that the island could not provide for themselves from the sea. And so, as a result, most of the island's economy would rely on licensing fishing permits to international fishing companies as well as remittances, which is where Tuvaluans would go and send money back home while living or working abroad. It's also one of the lowest lying countries in the world, with an average elevation of just 2 meters or 6.6 feet above sea level. When it comes to the highest elevation in all the islands of Tuvalu, well, get ready to grab your oxygen mask because you'll be climbing for an entire couple of seconds up to the highest elevation of 4.6 meters or 15 feet above sea level. Yeah, that's not a lot of wiggle room to work with. In addition to not having a lot of soil, what soil they did have was not good. It was of terrible quality, which is exactly the issue I was talking about before. It doesn't really matter if you have a ton of soil, because in the event that it's not necessarily useful for anything, you're kind of fresh out of luck. It's rough, it's porous, alkaline, and coarse textured, with high pH values of up to 8.2 and 8.9. This means that the soil is typically devoid of any of the nutrients that plants crave. Gabby, please don't. Dear God, my wife just put in the whole quote about the electrolytes thing from Idiocracy. Anyway, in order to actually grow anything, the soil has to be enhanced with mulch and fertilizer, which also, like other food, has to be imported. From this, it means that Tuvalu has a very unique distinction, and not exactly a positive one, amongst the world's nations, with 0% arable land. As wild as that is, the island's low elevation is definitely its biggest concern. The sea level at the Funafuti tide gauge has risen at around 4 millimeters per year, which is twice the global average. From this, my friends, rising sea levels are hitting Tuvalu extra hard, but this is something that we have seen coming. It's estimated that a sea level rise of 20 to 40 centimeters, or 7.9 to 15.7 inches in the next 100 years, could make Tuvalu completely uninhabitable. And unlike what you've seen here before in the past with talking about the entire world getting drowned, as you would see from Al Gore and other figures like that, this is a much more serious and much more real example of how this can take place. Of course, don't just think that the people of Tuvalu have been sitting around and doing nothing. That's not the case. They've already done a variety of things, like banning single-use disposable plastics and levying higher taxes on items that are difficult to dispose of, such as refrigerators and air conditioning units and other stuff like that. And they've made higher elevated plateaus of earth on top of sandbags in certain places to stay above the level of the waters. The Tuvalu Coastal Adaptation Project, or TCAP, was launched in 2017 for the purpose of enhancing the resilience of the islands of Tuvalu to meet the challenges resulting from higher sea levels. Efforts were made to dredge the Funafuti Lagoon and use its sand and coral to fill holes in porous soil to regain around 8% more usable land. In December of 2022, work on the Funafuti Reclamation Project would commence. This project would aim to dredge the sand from the lagoon to construct a platform on Funafuti that is 780 meters long, or 2,560 feet, and 100 meters, or 330 meters wide, giving a total area of approximately 7.7 hectares, or 19.27 acres, which is designed to remain above sea level rise and the reach of storm waves beyond the year 2100. Though, really, who can say exactly what is going to happen, because even with all these efforts, that's simply not enough. We're talking about the second lowest maximum elevation of any country except the Maldives. And that highest elevation? It changes location from year to year because it's an area with tall sand dunes that shift constantly. These dunes are directly facing the water on the windward side of the atoll. During cyclones, those dunes have been known to topple over. In 1972, this actually happened when Cyclone Bebe would tear through the Tuvaluan atolls in October, which is unexpectedly early for that region of the globe. This storm almost completely submerged Funafuti, destroying 95% of all structures on the island and took the lives of 6 people. It's that delicate. The other problem that comes with massive storms rolling through is that fresh drinking water sources are contaminated temporarily, causing large costs of residents having to import even the most basic supply needed of all, clean water. But that's not only the thing. Tuvalu is also affected by Perigean spring tide events, which raise the sea level higher than a normal high tide. The highest peak tide recorded by the Tuvalu Meteorological Service is 3.4 meters or 11 feet, which was on the 24th of February 2006, and again on the 19th of February 2015. As a result of these historical sea level rises, the king tide events led to flooding of low-lying areas, which is compounded when sea levels are further raised by La Nina effects or local storms and waves. And so here you might be asking, okay, well, Stack, they need to probably invest in desalination methods, right? Yeah, that is something you could do, and yes, they did do that. Using reverse osmosis was only supposed to be used when water storage levels reached less than 30%. But the problem about accessing fresh water had gotten to the point that now the desalination plant is basically running 24/7, and even then, it is still not enough to meet all the country's demands. Really, the other thing that one needs to understand is that desalination is extremely expensive. So this means that for years now, the government has been paying subsidies for every single time someone accesses the water storage of the island. Which is wild, but also here's a couple of rapid fire facts about the nation. And yeah, I know this is random, but there's really no other good place to put it. So here we go. Tuvalu is one of the last countries in the world where male homosexuality is still illegal. No word yet on the legality of lesbianism, though, which is interesting, but that needs to be said. Also, Tuvalu technically has a state religion, which is the Congregational Church of Tuvalu, a part of the Calvinist tradition. Their biggest health challenges are obesity, causing diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And this is partly from the introduction of Western food that is less healthier than the traditional diet, but also it's because the majority of food has to be imported in the first place, which exacerbates that issue. And last but not least, they have one hospital, which is the Princess Margaret Hospital on Funafuti. Education is free for those between 6 and 15, and the literacy rate is going strong at 99%. Residents can start working at 14, but may not work hazardous jobs until the age of 16, and it has the infamous distinction of being the least visited country in the world, which is of course primarily due to how remote it is, being situated in the middle of a vast expanse of water, larger than most countries, before you get to its nearest neighbor, which is Fiji. But anyways, back to the biggest challenge facing the nation: rising sea levels and what to do about them. The answer is basically run away. 2 of its islands have already been mostly claimed by the waves. According to NASA's Sea Level Change Team, water levels around Tuvalu rose 15 centimeters between 1993 and 2023. And if that pace holds, much of its land and infrastructure will be completely wiped and gone by 2050. In the worst case scenario, double that rise would leave 90% of the main island of Funafuti underwater. And by that point, over 60% of the nation's people would lose all their homes. And for those who doubt the veracity of the reports regarding climate change here, we're not going to preach for any movements. It's something that can vary depending upon what kind of things you are looking at. But what we can distinctly tell you in this place that is a very obvious example of this: water levels have been rising. This is true. And so the people of this country are so concerned with this because they are potentially going to lose everything very rapidly that they have decided to mass migrate out of their own country. In 2023, Tuvalu and Australia would sign the Philippine Union Treaty, the first deal of its kind in the entire world. We haven't seen migration treaties like this, essentially, since the migratory periods, I would argue, of the Roman Empire. It offers 280 Tuvalu citizens each year the chance to settle permanently in Australia, with full access to housing, healthcare, education, and jobs. As Australia's Foreign Affairs Department would say, quote, Australia recognizes the devastating impact climate change is having on the livelihoods, security, and well-being of climate-vulnerable countries and people, particularly in the Pacific region, end quote. Also, an interesting aspect of the treaty is that it commits Australia to defending Tuvalu against natural disasters, health emergencies, and military aggression. Which that last part is kind of funny considering how, again, Tuvalu is the least visited country in the world. What could they possibly be defending their territory for or from? Well, actually, it's pretty easy to determine. The answer, as I talked about earlier with the economy, is fishing rights. Because of the way that international maritime law works, the exclusive economic zone of Tuvalu extends for 200 nautical miles from the islands, extending in every direction. This includes some of the most fertile fishing grounds in the entire world. In the past, Tuvalu has licensed out the rights to fish its waters to other countries, including the European Union, Asia, etc. Which I know, obviously not country, we're talking about regions at that point, but in geopolitical terms, Australia has greatly expanded its sphere of influence in the South Pacific. But in real world terms, it almost sounds like Australia adopted Tuvalu. And one can only assume that whether Tuvalu exists on the face of the earth or not, Australia will be guaranteed to have fishing rights in its economic zone for now and potentially into perpetuity, since they're going to take in and house the entire nation. Whether that's part of the treaty or not, it's almost guaranteed to happen if it hasn't already. The first round of applications to migrate to Australia opened for just 2 days in June of 2025. And if you're wondering if they got 280 applicants, yeah, they did. In fact, the Australian High Commission on Tuvalu, its version of an embassy, released a statement saying that they had 8,750 applicants. Which, yeah, if anyone remembers from the beginning of this video when I said that 11,000 people live on the island, that means that 82% of the entire population was trying to get out as soon as humanly possible. Tuvalu's ambassador to the UN told Reuters he was, quote, startled by the huge number of people vying for this opportunity, end quote, as if his country wasn't quite visibly sinking into the ocean. Now, you may be saying, Stack, if it's such a crisis, why not let more people move to Australia all at once? Well, there's a few reasons for that. If they just let as many people move to Australia all at once, it might cause the Tuvaluan economy to suddenly and rapidly collapse. Another is because the problem isn't going to happen all in the next few years, it's going to happen gradually. So letting a massive number of people start leaving the islands might cause a migratory panic, which would then also send the country into chaos. You don't want that. Australia is supporting Tuvalu's coastal adaptation project to create new space for housing, critical infrastructure, and essential services in Tuvalu, building buffers and reinforcements so coastal buildings can withstand higher tides and intensifying extreme weather. This is the same project dredging Futafuti's lagoon to build those higher decks of earthworks to temporarily raise the level of the capital city, where the island's most crucial piece of infrastructure resides. It's one and only full-service airport runway. And hey, speaking of runway, one thing that Tuvaluans are known for, aside from their incredible seafaring and navigational abilities, is their resourcefulness. On an island where a lost shipping container means the difference between wearing the latest Air Force Ones and wearing the old school barefoot twos, if anything can be used for secondary purpose, it will usually be used in that way. So when flights aren't scheduled, the people of Funafuti use the runway as a meeting place, a playground, a racetrack, and a cookout spot and gathering place for Tuvaluans of all age. Like, really, who needs a village plaza or a town square when you have half a mile of flat tarmac to use, I guess? When flights are scheduled, the locals are informed a few hours ahead of time so they can clear the runway. But remember, this is the world's least visited country. So aside from cargo or supply shipments by air, there's really not too much air travel going in and out of Tuvalu. What little there is comes on such a regular basis that the townspeople typically know what days they can be on the runway and what days they can't. The length of that runway and the amount of land being wasted seems unconscionable to the Tuvaluans, as resourceful as they are. So they don't mind the traffic as long as they keep getting to use the runway for social purposes when it's not being used for actual intended purpose. Which honestly, this does go and highlight the highly sociable and community-oriented nature of the people of Tuvalu as well. If there's an opportunity to sing, dance, or congregate, they're taking it. I guess that when you're that far away from the rest of the world, you grow closer to anyone that you've seen, and they're also just as isolated from the world as you are. So yeah, my friends, in a world's first, an entire nation is going to eventually become refugees, and it's likely going to happen again. But Tuvalu isn't just content to move to Australia and watch their culture evaporate. What kind of options are they left with? Well, one option they are boldly taking is to become the world's first digital nation. What does that even mean, you may wonder? Well, in 2022, Tuvaluan minister Simon Kofe would announce the initiative that will digitally recreate the land, its history, and the culture of its people, as well as moving all governmental functions into a digital space, most likely the metaverse. First, this involves using drone footage, aerial photography, and LiDAR 3D scanning to record all 124 islands and islets that make up Tuvalu. This is the same 3D LiDAR scanning that Ubisoft used in Assassin's Creed Unity to recreate the Notre Dame Cathedral. And those scans were made so accurately, after it burned down, they used the scans and photos that were used to make Notre Dame in the game to rebuild the real life Notre Dame Cathedral. So, yeah, they've got the physical part of recreation covered. Now, how serious is Tuvalu about the whole digital nation concept? Well, probably pretty serious. Tuvalu actually amended its constitution to reflect a new definition of statehood, the first of its kind in the world. The amendment pronounces that the state of Tuvalu, within its historical, cultural, and legal framework, shall remain in perpetuity in the future, notwithstanding the impacts of climate change or other causes resulting in the loss of physical territory of Tuvalu. And you might think, okay, well, that's all well and good, but it doesn't mean that the rest of the world is going to still recognize them, right? Well, actually, no, not quite. Tuvalu has already formalized agreements with other countries, having now signed 12 joint communiques acknowledging Tuvalu's permanent sovereignty, with the Bahamas, Cook Islands, Gabon, Republic of Kosovo, Marshall Islands, Niue, Palau, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Taiwan, Vanuatu, and Venezuela. These are countries that are recognizing their online presence as a nation before they've even gone fully online. And that is honestly pretty wild, especially if even Venezuela is recognizing you as a functioning country and government, then, I mean, you're probably doing something. Following this, the 18 nations of the Pacific Island Forum would collectively pronounce that their statehood and sovereignty will continue, and the rights and duties inherent thereto will be maintained, notwithstanding the impact of climate change, related sea level rise, or anything else. This took the current total number of countries who have legally recognized Tuvalu's digital sovereignty to 20 in total. So, what does this all mean for the rest of the world? Well, it means that we get to watch something the world has never seen before: the mass digital migration of an entire nation from physical to digital space. Yeah, eventually all the people of Tuvalu will be physically living in Australia at some point or elsewhere in the future. But if this digital nation concept is fully realized and fleshed out as they intend, then the culture and memories of the homeland are not going to vanish forever. And much like the Russo Japanese War was a primer for all the countries that fought a decade later in World War I, this process and the treaty that's been signed are all going to help the next nation that has to flee its ancestral home against their will. The eventual hurdles and problems that Tuvalu is going to experience, though, through this process will only serve as valuable information with which to help the next people that are going to come after them. And yeah, I know it sounds a bit cynical and a bit fatalistic, but if this scenario where a country is physically going to vanish and remain in an online form is going to repeat itself, then why not use the valuable experiences of the people of Tuvalu for some good in the grand scheme of things? Also, on a more positive note, I mean, shout out to Australia for being a good neighbor and offering a home to a homeless neighbor of theirs. It's a really big commitment to guarantee the continued existence of another country, no matter how small that country may actually be. As for the people of Tuvalu, well, most of them will have to wait their turn, as for now, only 280 citizens per year are allowed to migrate. Now, if the situation suddenly worsens, that could be reassessed. The most likely scenario in which this were to happen is if Tuvalu is hit by a massive cyclone that wiped out most of the country's structures away. But that's also really more of a humanitarian event, which Australia would provide assistance for with anyway. Either way, no two countries in the world are no closer than Australia and Tuvalu have become. I would use marriage as a metaphor, but the power dynamics in play here really make it more like a parent-child relationship, as Australia has functionally just agreed to be Tuvalu's legal guardian going forward till the end of time. And that's pretty much all the news here for now regarding the situation. If there's something that we missed, please let us know in the comments. It's been really great to speak on something happening geopolitically that has literally never happened here before, and I can say distinctly that I did not cause this to happen, as many people blame me for other events. So yeah, it's fascinating. Either way, my friends, thank you all for watching. Make sure to check out Patreon for additional content, and let me know in the comment section below what it is that you'd like to see next. Thank you, and goodbye.